Due to the following CBS School Break special, Magnum PI will not be seen today. It will be broadcast tomorrow in the regular time period.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I'm here with the Zub Mariner, everybody. It's Jimmy Zub.
Hey.
Come on, a lot of people have to call you that, right, Jim?
Oh yeah, I get the Zub Marine, the Zub machine gun, Zubway. It's just a constant, like and subscribe, which I actually use. And then my newsletter, if people sign up for my email newsletter, is called the Zubstack. So
yeah, Zubstack, absolutely.
Gotta be, gotta lean into it. The brand.
I understand, man.
Into it. It's good.
All right.
It has been. We were talking about this off stream. Over 3 years since we've chatted. Last time,
I'm sorry, Jim.
You and I chatted. Everyone's busy. It's all good. But
I appreciate that. But that is so typical.
It's crazy, right?
Where it's like, hey, let's talk soon, and then I look up, and literally, in some cases, 2 or 3 years since that.
Life is a tornado, man. But yeah, we were literally doing lockdowns last time you and I chatted, and we were trying to keep energy up, and you were really, I listened to some of it just to kind of remember where we were at, and you were very buoyant. You were like, we're gonna come out of this, everything's gonna be fine. I was a little more kind of even on it, I don't know, man, it's a little strange right now.
Well, they survived the Spanish flu back in 1918.
Sure.
And it's and that was as bad. I mean, God, you see those photographs and illustrations of that weird bird mask with the long beak and everything that people were wearing.
I mean, it's crazy now, of course. It seemed like in the midst of it was never going to end, and now it's sort of okay. Varying degrees, and it's still throwing me a couple loops in terms of con season, but yeah, out in a big way. Back then, I mentioned to you that in 2020, I was supposed to take a teaching sabbatical, and I'm on it now. So starting in late April, I started a big break, a 16-month teaching sabbatical. So I've been, jet setting around and doing conventions and promoting and all that kind of stuff. It feels weird to have one full-time career instead of two at the same time. So maybe that's why I'm getting some actual rest for a change. It's good. It's really good. Yeah.
That's good to hear. Here, a couple opening comments from people. DC Patrol says, I wish I could stick around and chat. I have to go. Looking forward to this. You both rock. Conan has been his best ever. So that's cool. Man,
that's really cool. So DC Patrol does these little short videos he's been posting about the book, and I'm just so ecstatic. It's been great. That's really cool. So sweet.
That's cool. Henry Barajas is also joining us and says,
dude, Henry's
Jimmy
the best,
Zub
man.
is one of the best in the comic book industry.
You. Henry, he's so amazing. It's very sweet. Well,
something we've brought up before, Jim, is the way, and truly, you've got your Jedi mind tricks, and you're able to diffuse some of your harshest critics by kindness. And it's
I joke that it's Canadian Aikido, you sort of redirect the energy or what may have you. I've always looked at it at least if someone's really, really passionately coming at me about something, it's usually because they're passionate about the subject, about the series, about the title. And God knows I'd rather they're reading than they're not reading. It's not that I'm not one of those people who's I'm going to kick up a hornet's nest to try and make you angry. But on the other hand, I want your passion. The worst thing I think is ambivalence. If someone doesn't care at all, or they're like, oh, is that book even being published? You're like, oh God, I'm dead. I'm so dead. You know what I mean? And I do. One of the things that's been amazing, honestly, has been the Conan fandom, and now just the comic fandom in general kind of coming back on board the series in such a big way. This has been an absolute rocket ride for me in the best way possible. I'm in a really, really cool spot right now. And yeah, the fans really do make it all worthwhile, and their passion, it pushes upwards. The retailers see it. They tell me how much they're, enjoying the new book, and that it's having a really cool ripple effect. And I'm sure we're going to talk at length about that, this evening, because there's all sorts of cool stuff that is kind of gone with that. The industry is always moving, it's always changing and things are going on. But yeah, last time you and I spoke, Conan was still at Marvel. We were coming out of the sort of pandemic pause, and I was hoping that we were going to get, all kinds of momentum. But honestly, just plans had changed over at Marvel and just in general. And instead of kind of winding up, we ended up winding down. I did do the Conan 300 issue, and that ended up being the last one of the monthly series. That was the sunsetting of the whole thing, which was honestly surreal, because it's like, man, I wanted to be on that book for such a long time, and I was hoping to have this big, crazy long run, and now we're in this whole other different state. So it's utterly bizarre, but in the best way possible. But yeah, the people over at Signatures, that's the people who run kind of all the Robert E. Howard character library. They're really sweet. Fred Malmberg, the guy in charge, and Jay Zetterberg, and just everyone over there. They Fred said when things were wrapping up, they're like, we thought you had a really good handle on the character, and we like what you did, but obviously plans have changed, and we're going to be moving on. Please stay in touch. And I was sort of like, well, that's nice, but that's what everyone kind of says. That's the professional, and you don't know what when someone sends you those emails, you don't know if that's with a GTFO attached to it, or like, professionally speaking, like, it's not to say
Sure.
yeah, like, well, that's cool. And it's not like I never thought I would ever do Conan again. I just, in my head, I sort of envisioned like, oh, if there's another anniversary or a one shot, or like the equivalent of the All-Star game where you come out and you wave and you go, "Hi, Conan," and you crack a little thing, or like that was kind of how I had envisioned it. Honestly, there was no way that when you lose one of those flagship books, that's just the past. That's a milestone for your career, and you did what you could do. Sometimes it goes long and sometimes it doesn't. But they genuinely did stay in touch. And a little while later, they reached out to me and they said, we're looking at something very different. And this is something a lot of people don't realize. So the Conan series is being published at Titan, but it's not your typical licensing deal. So it's actually a publishing partnership. So Heroic Signatures is actively involved in the creative on creating the stuff between those covers in particular, and funding it, those aspects of it and things like that. And Titan is publishing it in English, and they're the primary publisher of the comic. But then the book's also being published in 6 other languages through Panini and whatnot. And
Sure.
so the idea was that Conan's been almost continuously published for over 50 years in comics. The character's got a strong brand, and Heroic felt like they wanted to have a stronger hand on the steering wheel. So they wanted to really control the creative. And if that meant it wasn't a licensing deal, then that's fine. And so they were looking at those kinds of options, and they had already, I don't know if they had worked out the deal or they were in the midst of finalizing the deal for Titan to do the prose. And Titan has their comic division. So it looked like something where they could just bring it all under the same tent. But they needed a proposal. What do you do, with the property? What do you keep? What do you change? What do you refine and whatnot? And it was, the term a bake-off, where you have multiple writers pitching on a concept.
Sure.
It's always one of those awkward things where you're pitching on a book and then you find out many months later who you were up against, and you're like, oh, everyone's, someone got it and everyone else is giving them side eye or whatever. But I don't know who pitched on the book. I'd heard, that there were, I think 10 or 12 different writers that were pitching.
Wow.
And to varying degrees. And I don't know if that was, here's a storyline, here's a plan, here's a whatever. And I kind of, I told my wife, I said, well, I'm amazed they're even asking me to pitch, because like, I just did it, and that's not how this stuff works. You don't move between publishers and get the same gig. Like, that's not how it goes. And she's like, well, then why did they ask you? And I said, because they're being nice and they're professional and they're polite. And she's just like, or they thought it was really good and you had potential and they want you to actively pitch. And so she kind of, built me up, kind of rebuilt me. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And for me, I wrote that document up, and for me, it was almost like, it wasn't a eulogy, but it was like getting it out of my head. It was like, well, I'm not going to get this thing. There's no way. So I might as well be unvarnished. And I wasn't mean or anything, but just just unfiltered. Here's what's cool about Conan. Here's why I'm passionate about it. Here's what the property feels like it's missing to me. Here's what the fan base seems really hungry for. And I think there's some potential here, and wishing you all the best, and, all that kind of stuff. And sent in this document with genuinely no preconceived notions that this was going to happen. Like I sent that thing in, and it was really cathartic for me, because I could step back and just go, okay, that was my time with Conan. I got those thoughts out of my head. I've got other cool projects that I'm building on, and you can't obsess over the one that got away in a sense. And then, I don't know, it must have been a couple weeks later, Fred says, hey, can we jump on a Zoom call? And I still couldn't see it. In my head, I was like, oh, they're turning down people on Zoom calls. That is the most polite thing. I like that. And then that seems so stupid and naive now that I think about it. But it was like, it just seemed so impossible. Like, it didn't even enter my mind. I told my wife, I'm getting a call with the Conan people. She's like, why? I said, I think they're calling everyone, and they're going to do like hey, we're going in a different creative direction. Stay in touch. How's your family kind of stuff. And she's like, well, that's classy. And I'm like, they are. They seem like really classy folks. And we get on this call, and they're both smiling from ear to ear. And they're like, Jim, we read through all the documents, and we passed them around the office, and we talked to, all sorts of different people. And then we took all the names off the documents, and we knew who wrote what, but just to keep it pure, reading back and forth passages and arguing and all sorts of different stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And I was waiting, like I could literally hear the next statement. It was going to be, and we've decided to go in a different creative direction, but we love your passion, and we'd love for you to be involved in some future capacity, blah, 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 blah. And instead they just say, and we are more confident than ever that you're still the guy. And I think my eyes bugged out. Like, I was so thrown off that this was what they were saying. And I said, are you serious? And they go, are you not? And I was like, no, I'm totally down for this. I just cannot believe that this is happening. You know what I mean? And terrified, in the sense that I knew the pressure was really on, that we had to come out of the gate just like, my God, like we had to come out swinging like crazy. And so then the task came, we got to find art teams that are like up to the bar. And man, oh man, we did not disappoint. I am so thankful. Roberto De La Torre was our opening salvo, and that free comic book day issue hit like a thunderclap, and people freaked out, and I was freaking out. And then Doug Braithwaite, stepping in for the opposing arcs, and it's like the two of those together, it's been like titans. Like, I feel like so unbelievably fortunate. And so it has been one of the most creatively satisfying projects. I don't know if you saw in the news at San Diego, I signed a long-term contract. So they gave me 12 issues. They were sort of like, as much as we love your ideas and we think these are cool, the market is crazy. And comics are wild, and no one knows what retailers will respond to. You try, but sometimes it just doesn't take root. And so we'll promise you 12 for sure. We can do these 12 issues. So I kind of built this arc that was, if we only get the 12, you get a satisfying kind of epic adventure. But if we can go further, I've got way bigger mythic kind of plans. And those 12, just what a rush, what a crazy launch. We launched at San Diego Comic-Con last year. People freaked out. Over the course of the next couple of months, we had 6 printings of issue 1. We did 3 printings of issue 2 and 3, and then 2 printings of, I think, 4 and 5. we just kept we did that the joke they called the Immortal Hulk, where we like launched and then dipped and then kept rising. So after like issue 3 sold more than 2, and then 4 sold more than 3, and 5 and 6 and 7, and it just kept rising right through like the first 8 issues, which is insane. And I have never ever gotten a response to a book like this. I haven't gotten a response like this when I was doing Avengers, when I was doing D&D or Rick and Morty or Stranger Things or Iron Man, like nothing. And all those experiences have been amazing. But what I realized was, so like, you know, Wade and Ewing and I did, you know, Avengers together when Infinity War was coming out. And
Yes.
then we did the second weekly one when Endgame was coming out. And that was amazing because the Avengers was the hottest media property on planet Earth. And I was doing tons of interviews and all sorts of promotion, but it wasn't about us. It wasn't about the comics. It was like, have you guys met Robert Downey Jr.? You know what I mean? Like, are you going to get to go to the premiere? Like all sorts of these Hollywood style questions. And so you're riding the lightning on that thing, and you're having a very cool experience because everyone's talking about Avengers, you know, and your grandmother knows what you do for a living finally, and stuff like that. But it's not actually about, the comics are just this swirl of satellite product. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And Rick and Morty was the hottest, you know, show on television, and Stranger Things, you know, was super hot, and D&D was ascendant. The 5th edition was the best selling one of all time. And so again, you're part of this swirling storm of stuff, and it's very cool and it's very exciting. And it's like, I'm very fortunate that I've been in those places and gotten to contribute to those things, but they're not about you. You know, they're about the cartoon, they're about the game, they're about the Netflix show. And so it was always, even when I was on a hot book, even when it was selling really well, or when people were excited about the title, they were excited about the media spectacle. And this is the first time in my career that, like, Conan is hot right now. Sounds weird to say that, but it's like Conan's a big deal right now. There's no new movie. There's no new video game. There's no satellite. We're not on the fringes of the discussion. We're the pillar. We're the central reason why people are talking about Conan.
Yeah.
So every time Conan comes up, it's because the book is good, because the writing is great, because the art is phenomenal, because it's consistent and it comes out on time and it's crushing it, you know? And so that is such a cool feeling to realize that we're getting all the messages are like this very natural grassroots. Are you reading this book? Why aren't you reading this book? You know, old school fans who've been collecting since the 70s coming out of the woodwork. I got retailers telling me that they've got people who are starting up pull files that haven't had a pull file in 20, 25 years. And now they're there day and date every issue. That they're buying collections of Savage Sword magazine and they're selling through them because their back issue bins are turning on Conan books. You know, like that's like the highest kind of compliment that you can imagine, that you are changing the face of their retail, that you are exciting a fan base that has been dormant, you know, in that way, and electrifying them to read, and that once a month is not enough. You know what I mean? That they want that feeling back. And I knew we were doing really well. Like the book launched like crazy and people were pumped for it. And you're like, okay, but that's a number one. Okay, but you know, we're just getting started. I did New York last year and I was at New York Comic Con, and we had maybe 4 or 5 of these guys, like old enough to be my dad. And they came over to the table and they were like shaking my hand vigorously. And they were like, kid, you have no idea. This is, you know, really, really sharp stuff. And I feel like I'm 15 again. And this means so much to me. And you're just like, oh, this is really cool. And this is such an honor. And you really, it galvanizes your understanding that you're part of this broader legacy. But then I did Emerald City Comic Con in March, and I probably had 50 of those guys. And you're like, oh, okay. Like this is just rippling outwards. Like it's, the good word of mouth has gone on long enough that these guys who were pretty much out of comics, or they had sworn off of hitting the comic book store or collecting a book, it's finally woken them up, and they're like, all right, let's see if this is, worth its weight. And they're sticking around. And, that has been really, really cool. And new readers who've never read a Conan book before, and on and on and on, And so that's been probably the most amazing aspect of this thing is realizing that we've got this really cool thing. And so although they told me I had 12 issues to prove it, by like issue 3 or 4, we were already negotiating, like, okay, we got to do a long-term, we got to build out this mythic thing. And so at San Diego, we announced that I've signed an extension on my Conan contract. I'm going to be on the book for at least 3 more years.
Wow.
Yeah, which in current comics is not, it just doesn't really happen. You know what I mean? I'm not exclusive, so I can take other writing from other publishers, but I'm committed to this title, and we've got this really cool thing. And it's like, I'm on this book till at least issue 50, and let's build something for the ages, And that is, I don't want to say unheard of, but in current comics, it's highly unusual, because some people will do longer runs than that, but they're always looking over their shoulder every 6 or 8 months, not knowing if they're going to get the rug pulled out from under them, or a reboot, or what may have you. And I'm just like, like issue 15 is going to be coming out in a couple weeks, and I'm writing issue 24, so this is like next summer stuff. Like that's a really good, fun spot to be, and planning out much further than that structurally, as far as any of that goes. We brought back Savage Sword of Conan in the original black and white format, magazine sized. And that was a real test case as well, because readers said that's what they wanted. But I think if I remember correctly, I had asked Marvel about that. I said, when they were going to bring back Savage Sword, why they weren't doing black and white magazine size. And they said they polled their retailers, and retailers said they didn't want it. And so Titan was sort of defiant, and Heroic was very much defiant. Like, we want to see, like, because people keep saying it's such a nostalgic format and all these things. We'll do 6 issues, comes out, bi-monthly, and we'll see if there's a readership for it. And lo and behold, that thing's blown up. And now it's, doing amazing as well. And so I think there's been a really good, it's a natural kind of a growth, rather than trying to, oversaturate. And we're striking a chord, which feels really, really special. I'm blathering up a storm. I haven't even left you room to breathe here. I'm sorry.
Jim, it's all good information, and it inspires more questions. So without spoiling, can you go over some of the cliff notes of, this is what Conan should be, this is what the readers want?
Right. So, first and foremost, you've got to look at the original source material. So Robert E. Howard wrote, depending on how you count it, like 21, 22 original Conan stories that some were published after his demise, but those form the kind of canon. There's a handful of fragments as well. And so the character has a much larger pop culture footprint, thanks to the movie, thanks to the games and everything else, but that we need to hew back to the original as much as possible. That there's an audience that wants a really raw and intense kind of pulp feel, and that we could serve them in a way that even more intense than an experience than what Marvel's kind of was able to do in terms of their baseline publishing, where they're doing teen rated kind of stuff. And even at Dark Horse, they didn't kind of hit the full, whatever you want to call it, R-rated kind of button, and that we could do that with Titan. Then on top of that, I felt it was really, and that's your core audience. Like, the readership is in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Like, I'm not worried about an 8-year-old necessarily picking this book up, or something like that. But then also the fact that what was really important to me was this idea that we were going to use the original kind of canon stories, but not just readapt them. I felt like it's not even a mistake, but they had done twice at Marvel, they had done it, and then at Dark Horse, they had tried to tell Conan as a youth and then tell every single story in between. And the character is mythic. He's iconic. He's like Batman. He's like Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Superman. He's older than Superman. He's a genre-defining character. There are an infinite number of stories you can tell, and so trying to fill in every gap, trying to it limits possibilities instead of opens them up. And so the original Weird Tales stories, the prose stories from the pulps, they jumped around like crazy. The very first published Conan story, he's already a king. We don't start looking back to his youth until the third one. And so what I wanted to do was jump around the timeline, but you would have thematic arcs. So we'll have some stories when he's young and some when he's in his prime and some when he's a king. But what you'll notice when you're reading the monthly book, even though we're jumping around the timeline, thematically, I'm showing you something when you need it. So the first year, for example, of the new Conan series, we built on this idea of the Blackstone. It's this mythic kind of MacGuffin material. And we were peppering in these moments exactly when Conan had interacted with this material and the ripple effect that it had in terms of adventures. And now this miniseries we've got going this fall, first issue came out a couple of weeks ago, called Battle of Blackstone, kind of finishes that off. It takes that to a whole other level, and it actually ties in a bunch of other Robert E. Howard characters. I wanted to make sure that the main monthly book was always just the Hyborian Age, that we're not sending you off to crossover stuff outside of the monthly book, but that the monthly book can always build our myth and can build the mythology that we can then pay off in other places, or we can then do more with in other titles like Savage Sword or these kind of event miniseries. And so if you're reading the monthly book, you're going to get wicked entertainment. We're going to earn the cover price every single month. But the more you read, the more you're going to see we've got this cool thing built out. And even though we're jumping around the timeline, you're going to notice these inner kind of weaving stories and all kinds of cool symbols and concepts, and sometimes specific phrases that are going to weave their way back through. So the more you're paying attention, the more you're going to get out of the book. And each year has its own kind of pillar and these core concepts and themes and stuff that we're trying to explore about Howard's original writing, about the Hyborian Age, about what makes Conan such a cool character and why he is the pop culture icon that he can be. And then more audacious was this idea that there were certain concepts of the character that have now become, let me show you another example. Superman didn't originally fly. He jumped around, and he wasn't at the Daily Planet originally, and there was no Jimmy Olsen, and there was no kryptonite. But if you didn't have those things in a Superman story, they would feel deficient, right? Because they are so tightly packed into what makes that character who they are. And I feel like there are a few things in Conan that are like that as well. And so what I wanted to kind of do was fuse some of those into the kind of core story, and without losing the canon, that the Robert E. Howard stories are still the baseline. I'm not just trying to say, oh, the Arnold movie is canon now, but that there's also stuff in there. There's certain phrases or there's certain symbols, things like the Atlantean sword and stuff like that, that have taken on such a great significance that to the vast majority of the public, they are just part and parcel of Conan. So how can we incorporate those into the ongoing story in a way that feels natural and holistic without losing, what makes the character who they were from the start? And so that has not really been done before. And so far, so good. We've been able to do that. The fan base is not, threatening for my head or anything like that, but we're doing all sorts of kind of cool stuff to drive the story forward and keep people guessing. And the other thing I said was really crucial was that we weren't just going to readapt existing, Robert E. Howard stories. As cool as those are, I really, really didn't want to be a cover band. You know what I mean?
Sure.
The hits have been played so well, and if you just redo them over and over again, it's almost impossible for me to surprise you. And that if you just know for the next 5 months we're doing whatever, Tower of the Elephant, then you'll wait for the trade, or you might forget to pick up the monthly book at all or the trade because you know the way that thing's going to pay off. And yet if I change the story in the ending, what have I done? You know, you've just spit on the Mona Lisa or whatever. So so I said, you know, you have to tell new stories so that from month to month, people don't know what they're going to get, that they feel that excitement of the great unknown, that we can use those stories as to inform the character. And I can tell you between which stories, you know, my stories take place, and we'll reference them in flashbacks, or sometimes plot points or characters will carry over from them, but that we're not just coldly going through the motions, because that will feel that it'll just lack momentum, you know, let alone the fact that almost every one of those stories has been adapted in such phenomenal fashion by either John Buscema or Barry Windsor Smith or Carrie Nord or you know, Tim Truman or whoever. And now you're just inviting brutal comparison, you know, unnecessarily so. Yeah.
Have you had the opportunity to talk to Roy Thomas or some of the other writers, or even the former artists and everything that have worked on?
So it's fascinating. One of the things we've been able to do with Savage Sword is it is a classic kind of black and white, oversized magazine anthology, and so we're doing a mixture of classic artists and writers are coming back, and new people who have never done them before. And so Roy's contributing essays, and he's got a story coming up. Carrie Nord's just did a story with Frank Thierry, which was a lot of fun. We've been Jeff Isherwood's going to be doing a new Savage Sword story. So it does feel like, hey, you're still part of the Hyborian family. You're not just in the past. It's an ongoing kind of celebration. And that's what's so cool about that book. I've only met Roy once in person. I don't know if I told you this anecdote, but it's a good one. Anyways, I met Roy at Paris Comic-Con in 2019. And I was there for the French launch of Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons. And they thought they had enough books for the whole weekend. And it turns out we sold out of them in like 3-4 hours. And so all of a sudden, I have nothing to do. I got this 3-day show, and in half a day, we're out of books. They're calling their distributor, trying to get more. I got nothing to do. So I'm wandering around. I stopped by Panini. I signed some of my Marvel stuff. And then I'm kind of a free-floating operator. And Roy is one of the guests of honor at the show. He's got like a 2.5-hour line. And I'm like, man, I don't want to wait in a line for 2.5 hours to just like shake his hand and get something signed. I'm gonna flex a little. So I called the French rep for Paris Comic-Con, and I said, I'm one of your other guests. Is there any way I can set up a meeting with Roy through his representative or whatever? And they said it would be their pleasure to make it happen. So the next day, about 20 minutes before his first signing, we were kind of backstage, and I got to chat with him. And it was a delight. He was wonderful. Let me see if I can find that photo. I'll share it on the thing. But we, it was so cool. It was just so nice. And so we ended up. I was chatting with him. I was super nervous. It's weird. I don't get really starstruck very often. I've had a few over the years, and because those have gone well, I kind of like. I'm fine now. You know what I mean? Like the first time you meet whatever Frank Miller or like Neil Gaiman or someone, you're sort of like, blah, and then you realize, wait, they're human beings. It's going to be you're fine. Don't freak out or whatever. But this one, I was for some reason. The thing too, though, was I was going to be writing the Conan monthly book at Marvel, and it hadn't been announced yet, and so I had this weird like secret that I was carrying around. And I just, couldn't wait to announce this thing. And then I'm going to be meeting Roy Thomas. And so it carried all sorts of funky significance. I'm hunting for this photo while I'm telling the story here. And so I said to him, Mr. Thomas is a huge influence. And I grew up reading Conan, and it meant so much to me. And all the things that you need to say. And that's great. And you're glad you do it and all that jazz. But then it was like, I said, I've actually written some Conan, and he was like, oh, have you now? What have you written? I said, oh, it's recent stuff. You wouldn't have read it. It's modern, He said, no, I'm coming back to do a story for King Size Conan. Mark, the editor, he sent me a box full of everything. I read it all. And I was just like, oh crap, he read it all. and so then I was really nervous. And I said, well, I did this story in Savage Sword, and Marvel had done Savage Sword like a full color anthology. And it was a 3-part story called The Gambler. Patch Zerker drew it. And he goes, I read it. And I was like, oh, that's great. And he goes, I liked it. And I was like, okay. And I thought he was just pulling my leg. I thought he was just being super nice and professional. And that's what you always say. And then he starts going through the story and telling me what part of the plot he really liked, and the turns and the little moments that felt Howardian and whatever. And I'm feeling my body, like my soul is leaving my body. Like I'm getting tingles, and I'm all kind of messed up and like, oh crap, like Roy Thomas thought I Conan, right? You know, like what the hell? And I was really taken aback. I thanked him so much. That was really wonderful to hear. And then I said, Mr. Thomas, I've got a bit of a secret. I'm going to be taking over the monthly title. I'm the new flagship writer of Conan the Barbarian. And he looks at me and he goes, is that so? And I said, yeah. And then he slaps a hand on my shoulder and he goes, welcome to the fraternity.
Wow. Wow.
Like, come on.
Wonderful. Yeah. Are you kidding me? That's fantastic.
I walked. Do you have swearing on this show?
You can absolutely swear on this show. Yes.
So I walk back to my table, and my wife looks at me and she goes, are you fucking high? Because I looked like I was stoned, like I was tingly. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, you're dazed.
I was really wigged out. And I said, no, it's like I basically got knighted by, Roy Thomas. It was very, very sweet. Let me see if I can share it's present, right? Yeah. Hold on one sec here. Share screen.
Let's see if it works. This is great, Jim, because truly my guests never take control of this. Okay,
I bring my own stuff. There it is.
Yeah.
The shirt is very appropriate. I'm saying, dang.
Exactly.
That was a great moment. Yeah, man. I walked away from there just absolutely just buzzing like you would not believe,
That's wonderful. Hey, man, listen, the reality is, and it's kind of appropriate that we're talking about Conan, there is like an alchemy to writing and drawing Conan that a lot of other comics just don't have, because of the pedigree, because of the history.
Yeah. Because I feel like so many artists bring their best to that book. Like it unlocks something really cool, in them. I've been such a fan of Doug Braithwaite for so long. I met him years ago. He had done Justice and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, wow, this guy's crazy,
Oh my God, yeah.
And he was such a sweet guy. We had chatted. We were in this festival in Northern England, and he was very quiet and confident and knew what he did well and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, now that guy, that's an artist right there, And I never imagined that I would get to meet him. And then what happened was, we knew De La Torre wasn't going to be able to do every month. Like it would just kill him. He can do a book in a month, but that grind will just, it'll wreck you. And we knew that we were planned out in advance. We didn't want it to be a burden, or for him to feel like we were going to put more wicks in the candle than he could burn. And so Doug was just going to do, Titan had recommended Doug, and Doug was going to do some variant covers. And then just on a lark, I think they said, hey, you wouldn't be up for interiors, would you? And he said, I've always, I've never drawn Conan before. I'm actually really excited to do it. And he said, can we get on a call? And I thought, oh crap, and my editor at the time, Matt, he was like, Doug says he knows you. And I'm like, yeah, we met at a convention like years ago, but I was more of I'd been doing Skull Kickers and a couple things, but he doesn't really know my work or whatever. And so we get on this call and we have this wonderful conversation, and he's very cagey in the sense he's like, I'm just going to do these 4 issues. And that's kind of, my limit on it. I don't know if I'm built for this or not. And he said, I haven't read the original stories. I read the comics and I love them, but you guys are the experts. And we said, don't worry, we're going to send you tons of reference. We'll get you all lined up. I'll explain to you the significance of all the things that we're doing. And we were working on the 3rd issue of his arc. So that would have been 5, 6, 7, issue 7. And we were like, Doug, these are just stunning. We're so happy. Diego Rodriguez is coloring the hell out of this. I can't believe how beautiful it is. We would love for you to stick around for more issues. and he was very kind of didn't want to commit. And I thought, oh God, I how do I convince this guy to stick around? He's so perfect on the book. And a couple weeks later, he asked if we could jump on a Zoom call, and he said that he was having the most fun he's had, in years and years. And he asked if it would be okay for him to stick around. And I was just like, are you kidding? And so then he found out I was negotiating a long-term contract. And then he's like, well, now I want to stick around even longer. And that's just like the coolest, What I'm really excited about is I'm going to the UK at the end of October. I'm going to be doing MCM Expo in London. I'm actually running a Dungeons and Dragons game in a castle up in Newcastle.
Wow, that's
yeah, great. I know, right? This is my life now for the 50th anniversary of D&D, which tell my 10-year-old self any of this crazy shit. And then we're gonna do some signings. So Doug lives up there, so we're gonna grab dinner and hang out and do some signings. I'm gonna go up to Scotland for a bit because I've never been, and with a bit of luck, I can lure him up there as well and get him to do a couple signings up in Scotland. I just want to hang out with that guy, man. That guy he's the best. And if we're attached at the hip for the latter half of that trip, I'd be 100% down with that because he is just an absolute gentleman and just a stellar professional. And to tell you how hard he's working on this book, holy crap. I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to give you an exclusive here. I'm going to show you a couple preview pages from Conan number 15.
If I may, really quick, another reason, folks, who are listening, this is why you got to watch the videos. You got
to watch the video. Yeah, you're going to hear the audio. You're going to be like, "What exclusive?"
I'm glad I'm in the car with you as you're driving or while you're exercising.
It's cool,
but if you got time, come to the video because you get to see cool images like what Jim's going to show us.
So these are pages from Conan 15. So this is like just banging stuff.
Wow.
So So it's Frost Giant's daughter, 90 years this year. And so we wanted to, give a twist on the classic story. So we're telling it, but we're doing some other cool stuff as well. I don't want to ruin it, but it's beautiful, just stunning stuff. But here's the thing that makes me laugh. So, we get this great confrontation and then the 2-page spread. I gotta go bigger. All right. So this 2-page spread, love it. Absolutely stunning. Starkings comes in with his title lettering, whatever. This is the second version of the 2-page spread. So Doug drew a completely solid, really well drawn 2-page spread of Conan standing amongst the dead. It looked fine. No problem with it whatsoever. You wouldn't have thought anything wrong with it. And then like 3 or 4 days later, Doug just sends an email and he goes, I don't like it. I'm going to start over. And I was like, what? Like that's the kind of dedication he's got to the book, that he wanted to do this. He knew this key moment was critical. He wanted to make it the best it could be, like no compromise. You know what I mean? And the good thing is, because we've got the buffer and because, Heroic's goal at the end of the day, their job is to sell Conan and the Robert E. Howard characters. And they know an evergreen, high quality book is better than pumping out stuff. You know what I mean? And so they give us the space and they give us the time to make the book as beautiful as humanly possible. And I never want to take that for granted, And so he is drawing some of the best stamp pages of his life, and Diego's coloring best pages of his life, and Richard Starking's, everyone's putting their all into it. Yeah.
Are they making, because that's a great money shot. And to me would make a fantastic poster that they can sell.
What's so crazy is between De La Torre and Braithwaite, I feel like every issue we've got one of those moments. Like I build in these very big cinematic moments.
Yeah.
The way I always say when I'm doing the script, I'm like, this is the one that people are going to close the book and go, what the hell was that? You know what I mean? As much as humanly possible. I'll show you one that was from De La Torre did, like in issue 4. And it's, they used it in trailers. They used it all over the place because it's that moment. It's that crazy cinematic, moment. And it's the kind of thing that back in the day, you wouldn't have generally gotten the space to do that in the classic comics. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, where we've got this Bronze Age kind of feel, but we're also opening up the aperture and doing even crazier, cooler stuff. Is it going to show?
Do you want to reveal, or you want me to reveal?
Go for it.
All right, here it comes, everybody.
Right?
Boom.
Like,
look at that.
Big,
Come on.
bombastic,
Come on.
2-page spread storytelling, right? So, you know, when we can produce those and put that at the right moment, that just about every issue has one of those bangers. It has one of those payoffs. And you're like, you're going to get your money's worth. You're going to get your money's worth visually. We've got essays in the back. So there's this guy, Jeffrey Shanks. He is a Conan scholar. He's a Robert E. Howard scholar. And I'm like, this guy knows so much about pulp. He is literally an archaeologist who's also obsessed with pulp and history.
Wow.
And stuff like that. And so he's been writing about, you know, pulp storytelling forever. And he was a consultant on a bunch of the Conan stuff previously. And he was pointed towards me as a resource. Like, this is a guy you should talk to. If you ever have any questions or you need some clarification on the Highborn Age, Jeff is our guy. And we got on a couple of calls and we just like thick as thieves, man. Like the minute I realized how deep the rabbit hole went, this guy knows everything about everything when it comes to pulp. And it's not just Conan or even just Robert E. Howard. We'll talk and he'll say, did you know the reason why Howard was into this is because he was reading this stuff and he was obsessed with these authors and this research and these, you know, concepts that were really big in the 20s and the 30s. If you want to know more about that, then you should read this. And he just laser focuses me on all this cool source material. Or I'm throwing out big mythic ideas for our long-term plans. And I go, do you think that works? And he goes, not only does that work, but if you take this thing, this obscure little bit and bring it over, then it works even better. You know what I mean? Like, take this little string and tie it off. And, you know, there's 20 hardcore fans like me who are going to lose their minds, and other people are going to, you know, have a greater appreciation of it. So very early on, I don't know if it was me, but I said he did an essay in the Free Comic Book Day issue all about Robert E. Howard and his cast of characters. And I said, is there any reason why we can't do that every damn issue? Like, you know, and they were like, well, you know, is Jeff's going to get, you know, bored with this, or he's, you know, he only has so much he can say. And Jeff just starts laughing. He's like, oh, I'm bottomless, man. Like, you just tell me what we're doing. So every issue, he's got a really cool essay. And what it does is it gives you more bang for your buck. So you're getting more to read if you want to read it, right? But not only that, but it legitimizes and deepens your appreciation for the source material. It tells you that we're not just shooting from the hip, that we're thinking deeply about this stuff, that we care deeply about the legacy of it, and that we have a plan in mind. You know what I mean? And that is, it's kind of worth its weight in gold. And I felt that when we did Wayward and Zach Davison was writing those essays in the back about yokai and Japanese mythology and culture, it grounded us, it anchored us, and proved to readers that we weren't just playing off of cliches. You know what I mean? That we had a deep well that we were kind of working with. And Jeff's stuff does that. And now it's to a point where Jeff just wrote a story in the latest Savage Sword, because there's these two occult investigators that Robert E. Howard had called Kierwin and Conrad. And we were talking about how they were going to tie into the Blackstone stuff. And Jeff had all sorts of ideas. And I said, okay, well, you're going to write the short story that ties into it. He's like, well, I've never written a comic before. And I'm like, get ready, buddy. You're going to learn, you know, because he's got a good head for narrative. He knows the pulp material inside out. His references are immaculate. And I was like, dude, I can get you up to speed on format, you know, the primacy of the page and the real estate of the panels. And we're going to put you with a rockin' artist and it'll all work out, you know? And so I really kind of mentored him on it. Like, we went through, he sent me his outline, and I helped him break it into page count, and then break that into panels, and then understand the importance of a page turn and stuff that you take for granted once you understand comics as a medium. And it was fascinating, you know, teaching him and then having him respond so excitedly, where he's like, oh man, there's like a lot going on here. You're like, yeah, when it works, it all feels very effortless. You know, it's the same thing with like good comic lettering. If you've got good comic lettering, your eye is too busy flowing down the page for you to really worry about it. But if the lettering sucks, you won't notice anything else, because the page is broken and you don't know where you're supposed to be reading or when, you know?
I agree.
So
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, so it's been fun. Jeff sent me a photo of him holding the Savage Sword magazine when he got his comp copies, and he's like, I have a lot of books in this house, but this one's extra special. And you're like, I know that feeling, man. When you get that book, especially your first one, your first comic with your name on the cover, what the hell, man? That is the coolest feeling. You saw that Savage Sword #1, the Joe Jusko cover.
Yes,
Joe's first cover in like his first Conan cover in 25 years. Oh my God, man. I was so rocked. What the hell? It was like, I pulled those comp copies out of the box and I had like a moment because it was simultaneously a time capsule, but my name's on
here,
it.
hold on, Jimmy. I didn't realize you put it up. Hold on, there it is.
Yeah, right? And it's like, dude hasn't missed a step. If anything, he's leveled up. It's instantly iconic.
And that's the other thing, Jim, because I do think, because somebody mentioned, Usab said that, De La Torre is greater than Buscema. And then M-Dog said, well, no, it's an evolution. Well, it's an evolution. And if I may, the point is, Buscema was hitting monthly deadlines and certainly had reverence for the
absolutely
had reverence for the character, but now artists are given more time to do their best.
See, yes, the kind of page layouts that De La Torre is doing, these like Hal Foster by way of, like he's playing off these European artists and the bande dessinée stuff that he grew up on, and it's got little peppers of Toth and all sorts of things in there that Big John just didn't have the time to do. The market wasn't really primed for that kind of stuff, and there's a whole different host of influences involved. We've got better, paper stock and coloring fidelity and all sorts of things. Like, you got it. And so John's never to be topped in my head. We stand on the shoulders of frost giants or whatever you want to say. Like Big John and Barry, like those guys made, they transformed. And without the comic, you don't have the movie, and without the movie, you don't have the pop culture explosion, right? So I don't think it's about saying better than. I think it's saying what's amazing is that exactly that spiritual successor, that what I love about De La Torre stuff is he's acknowledging the past, but then he's able to take that look and feel and give it this dynamic quality. He's able to lay out a page, the chiaroscuro of his black and whites, his thoughtfulness in terms of the way his gesture and his figure work is very Frazetta, and make it feel like this lost graphic novel from the Bronze Age, but like super charged in a way that you've never seen before. With 100%. And Savage Sword was the naughty book where you could be a little more violent and a little more sexy, and then we can tune those dials as well. Like, I joke around that we're giving people the Conan book that they thought they read when they were 15, but now they're 50 and it still feels like you're 15 because it's actually gory and it's actually sexy. And not that the other ones weren't, but they were like titillating and they were like teasing, and still the majority of the violence was in the shadows and stuff. And I never want it to be exploitive. I never want the book to feel like we're pushing past that line, but that it's appropriately pulpy in the best way possible. That's
absolutely,
that's what's important to me, is that we're hitting that mark. And then it really does that we're building on that cool legacy, but we're also welcoming everyone to the party. That if you've never read Conan before, boom, Conan the Barbarian #1, or now, volume 1 and 2 and 3 is coming out in October, that it's a nice, clean area to jump in. You can do it. And now Blackstone is like, this was the real dream stuff. Being able to do the Blackstone book is like really surreal because, in the plan you say, okay, we need to rebuild trust with the fan base. We got to get them in the store monthly. We got to prove we can do it. Titan actually asked me originally for 10 issues in 12 months. And I said, no, we had to do 12 in 12. I said it was absolutely mission critical that we built the habit that every 4 weeks someone knows they're going to get a book. And we had a couple issues ship late, and I was getting really frustrated. In some ways, it was a real proof that we were doing something special, because the book would ship a week late and I would get angry messages from retailers and readers. And I'm like, that means you knew it was supposed to be out this week and you're angry that you're not getting it. That is not ideal. I want to please the customer, but in terms of your excitement and your investment, damn, that's working, man. And
Absolutely.
so Blackstone was sort of like, and if it goes well, we can start to bring these other characters into the mythology. And what we can start to do is something really ludicrously ambitious. And it's actually built on a really interesting tradition. So I don't know if you know this. Once, so Roy on the monthly book and eventually on Savage Sword, as a kind of a kickstart to get more ideas out there, he would take other Robert E. Howard stories and he would file the serial numbers off and turn them into Conan stories. So there are over 200 Robert E. Howard short stories, and there's about 20 something, Conan stories, depending on how you measure it. But Roy would take like an El Barak story, this pulp kind of explorer, and he would just file the serial numbers off and he'd put it in the kind of Middle Eastern-ish kind of area of the Hyborian Age, and boom, it's a Conan story. Or he takes one of the Lovecraftian style horror stories and he just, instead of everyone running away, Conan's going to fight the monster and he's going to do the thing. And it was a way to get a Howardian pulpy kind of feel extended out past the original stories and keep that momentum going. And it got to the point where when he ran out of most of that material that he could adapt, he started buying the reproduction rights to I don't want to use this disparagingly, but for lack of a better term, Conan ripoff novels and making them actual Conan comics. And you'll see some of those original issues. It'll say based on some other novel by some other novelist, and he just sort of fuses it into a fantasy story, in the Hyborian Age. And so I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to steal other people's stuff, and I don't want to repurpose Howard that way. But what I want to say is, instead of taking the original horror story of the Blackstone, that really happened in the 1920s when Howard says it happens, and Kieran and Conrad happens in the 20s and the 30s, and El Barak's happening in the 20s, and in the 1500s you've got Solomon Kane and Dark Agnes. All those stories actually happened, but they are thematically connected, and they're going to start to be symbolically connected and eventually connected via the supernatural. And so we can bring those characters together in a really cool way that feels like it crosses time and reality and is bigger and says something more, and use the rising tide to raise all ships. That Conan obviously has the biggest pop culture footprint out of all of them by geometrically. But then if I make Kieran and Conrad cool and Dark Agnes cool and Solomon Kane cool, and they're alongside Conan, maybe you want to read some more of their adventures. Maybe you're excited about that broader kind of pulp milieu, and I can bring you on board. And in some ways, that's the ultimate sort of test, because Conan, it's not like I'm not putting my heart into Conan. I absolutely am 100%. But no one has a vested interest, not no one, but very few people have vested interest in El Barak. If we get an El Barak readership out of this, you're like, well, that was us. Like, we built that,
Sure.
If Patch Zerker can build a Solomon Kane kind of hardcore, and that character's been published at Marvel and at Dark Horse, but if we can make it sustainable and exciting, that speaks volumes to, that we're really making a mark long term in terms of this publishing plan.
I'm going to put my one request in, because I didn't see it in the first chapter here, and I love the fact that all these other Howard characters and time periods are reflecting in this story. But this is and I listen. It was a product of its time, and there are a lot of things about Sailor Costigan that I think
Sailor Steve, man.
I love Steve.
Okay.
I love Steve Costigan,
so
as a boxing guy, I always love those stories. And
so people have asked me, and
sanitize the.
You're gonna love to hear this, though. You're gonna love to hear this,
please.
So De La Torre loves the boxing stuff, and he's like, I really want to draw a boxing story, and I'm like, dude, whatever you want to draw, I want to put the words to it. Holy crap, because your work is so phenomenal. So we have plans, man. So like I said, every year every year of the series, we are doing, we've got these big thematic kind of pushes. And I'll tell you that every fall, we're going to have one of these 4-issue miniseries that kind of take a bunch of characters. If you're just reading the monthly Conan book, it's always going to be Conan. Like Solomon Kane's not going to appear in the monthly Conan book. But in Savage Sword, all bets are off. And in these miniseries that are sort of these yearly payoffs for all of our plot lines and our building, that's where you're going to be able to see really cool interactions. And I didn't want to use them all at once because then it dilutes it. So everyone asked me, they're like, I can't believe you didn't use, Cull. And I was like, don't worry, like I got plans for Cull. And we had Cull show up in some issues of Conan, but like the Thurian Age and the Hyborian Age are tightly wound together. But I got plans for Cull and Brule, don't worry. And I got plans for Bren McMorn. And I got plans for your boy, Steve Costigan. So it's going to be really fun because I can put those cards down, and I know I can put those cards down 2 years from now. Do you know what I mean? That it doesn't have to be all at once, and that feels so cool to know. I know where we're at now. I know where we're going to be at a year from now. The next Free Comic Book Day issue, the next the next summer, like. It's not written, but it's all built. And that's what's so cool about it. And so what's really fun is we've got the structure in place. Everyone's pushing in the same direction. The crew at Heroic Signatures are so supportive and so wonderful. Chris Butera, my editor, he is a great collaborator and he's really fun to riff with and chat with. And he's always enthusiastic. Ashley Hodgkins, our assistant editor, she's super sweet and super organized and somehow keeps all the files moving through the system on a monthly book and now multiple, books with the miniseries. We have these conference calls and we're just laughing and we're excited and we're pumped and everyone's just putting themselves into it. They started up an official Conan the Barbarian YouTube channel. I don't know if you've checked it out. And the guy who hosts that, Sean Curley, he is a delight. And he's, we did, I'm jumping all over the place. We did Robert E. Howard Days. So it's this little book festival in Cross Plains, Texas, where Robert E. Howard lived the majority of his life and where he passed away. It's a town of less than 1,000 people. Someone told me, they said the population of Cross Plains is under 1,000 and falling. That was the way it was described to me, right? Just getting there is quite a task. I flew into Dallas, I rented a car, and it's a good 3.5 hour drive. And the last 45 minutes is mostly dirt roads,
Wow.
And they have this little gathering, and it started up, I don't want to put an exact date on it, at least 25 years ago, where a bunch of these Howard fans just showed up as close to the anniversary of Howard's death as possible to be at the house. The house is an American heritage home. It's a museum. And because it's such a small town, when you get there, the museum's locked. You have to phone a phone number that's on the front of the house. And these little old ladies will come and they're delightful and they'll unlock the house and they'll give you a little tour. And then they encourage you to buy stuff at the gift shop to keep the house up. Sure. But during Howard Days, it's open for 2 days straight. And people make this, not to sound too dramatic, but like a pilgrimage out of it, Sure. And they have all sorts of stuff throughout the city. They have, the library has a bunch of the original manuscripts on display, and they have a little banquet, and they have a barbecue, and they have panels and stuff. But it's so this is a town of less than 1,000 people, and we brought, 200, 300 people. We changed the face of the town for 2 days, 3 days really, because I came in a day early so that Sean, the guy who runs the YouTube site for Conan, he came in with a camera and we just filmed documentary material for the YouTube channel. We must have filmed 8 hours worth of stuff, at least. Normally all the rooms are roped off and they just took all the ropes down. So we're just walking through the house and we're going to all the stuff. They had brought back Howard's original writing table, which had finally been found. And that weekend they put it back in place. And almost as soon as they placed it, they were like, okay, Jim, sit at the table. And I was like, are you nuts? Wow. And yet there we were, and we were filming an interview at one point. And it was so funny. I'm sitting in the room, Howard's little writing room, which is right beside his mother's room where he tried to look after her while she was unwell. And I'm sitting in the chair and I'm talking to the camera. And I said, when Robert E. Howard made Conan, and I'm talking about the creation of the character, and Sean just stops and he goes, let's do that take again. Can you motion over to the table? And I said, right. And so I start talking and I just sort of die midway through. I go, when Robert E. Howard made Conan, and Sean goes, don't pause like that. I said, no, dude, it's like the gravity of like, I'm sitting at his freaking desk. Like, it's not like this abstract thing, we're right here, right now in the spot. And Sean goes, isn't that cool? And I was like, yes, it's beyond cool. It's crazy. The second morning I'm sitting on the porch and I get there early before they open everything up and before the festival officially starts. And it's just me. I'm just sitting on the porch and Jeff Shanks, who goes every year, he meets me there and we're just sitting on the porch and we're talking about life and we're talking about the book and we're talking about everything, man. And I'm like, we're sitting on Dr. Howard's porch here. Like, and he goes, yeah. Oh yeah. This is new for you. Cause he does it every year. Right. Like, yeah, it's pretty new for me. And he goes, well, you'll be back every year now. You're part of the family. I said, yeah, but it does feel like a family reunion. It's got all those notes, but I'm the weird cousin you guys didn't know about. And I have a deed to the house. It's different. It's weird, man. Like I'm really driving this thing. Like, it's really very, very exciting. And that he is so welcoming that I could easily have been treated like an interloper. You know what I mean? But the community there was so sweet. Mark Finn, he wrote probably the best biography of Robert E. Howard called Blood and Thunder. He was just a sweet dude and really, really nice, and high fives all around and stuff like that. Just all of them. Bill Cavalier, he's one of the guys who organizes the festival, and he's been there for ages. There's something called the Robert E. Howard Foundation, and that's a group of scholars and literary archivists. And their job, they're not the family and they're not the rights holders. It's really important to sort of state that. Their job is to promote the work of Robert E. Howard and to solidify his importance as one of the most important American authors, of original work. And the father of an entire genre of storytelling. And they have their own set of awards. And I had heard of them, vaguely, but it's called the Robert E. Howard Foundation Award. And I think to most people, they assume that it's like, oh, so like Conan gets it. And you're like, they actually don't give it out to Conan very often. They would rather give it to a writer who they feel writes in a pulp-like style, like Howard. There's frustrations around the commercialization and the sensationalization of Conan as this commercial property versus the literary significance of the work, right? And it's always art and commerce. They're always, in strange interlocking, issues. And so when I had asked vaguely about the Robert E. Howard Foundation stuff, what I was essentially told was, these are the hardest core of hardcore fans. You will never please them. Do the best you can. Write the stories that you think have value. And, if they like it, great. And if they don't take it personal. Most of these guys, anything outside of adapting Howard, they consider pretty much, anathema. And so you're like, okay, that's the baseline. You'll never please them. And so this year, I've been writing Conan stuff since Gail and I did the crossover at Dark Horse with Red Sonja 2015. And these guys had never looked my direction, and that was fine. Like I hadn't really ever thought of it, honestly. And then we got nominated for the literary award this year with Bound in Blackstone. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. And Jeff's like, you don't understand. That's actually more than amazing. The only comics that have ever been nominated, they don't nominate comics normally. And when they do, they're always just adaptations of Howard. Like you did, whatever. Tower of the Elephant, you did a really nice job. Good. Well, maybe you're on our radar, but they don't do original work. And so I was like, whoa. So he's like, yeah, you're real, kind of a dark horse nomination. Just be thrilled you got it. And I was genuinely thrilled I got it.
Sure.
And so we did the banquet, and then we did the award ceremony thing, and we won it. De La Torre and Villarubia and I, we won their literary award. And that was sort of a little bit of a ripple, because that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And to have something that is both commercially successful and is also now considered by some of the most stringent and like intense fandom that we're doing right by the source material, that feels unbelievably special. And, you know, I can't cater to any one particular thing. And, you know, that I've got to make the stories that I think matter, but it does definitely bolster my, you know, it bolsters my batteries. It makes me feel really, really good. So I go to pick up this plaque. I come up to, and everyone claps and whatever. And Bill Cavalier, he hands me this plaque and he puts a big hand on my shoulder and he goes, you know, Jim, we don't normally give them to the funny books, but you guys are doing a nice job. So keep it up. And it was just like,
cool.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And everyone telling me how, you know, I'm the new generation. And I'm like, dude, I'm almost 50. Like we got to really speak to a younger, we got to, you know, I'm not saying that we change the character, but we also need to do outreach. Like one of the things that's been really cool to me is hearing from people in their 20s and 30s who are reading the book and have never, they know Conan as a broader pop culture thing or Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever,
Sure.
but they don't realize how deep it can be and that the character is older than Superman, that defines a genre, that a bunch of the stereotypes and cliches that have kind of grown up, some of them are formed from the basis of Conan, but some of them are just extrapolations. The Big Dumb Barbarian probably being the most obvious one. Conan is not a stupid character, especially in the original Howard stories. This guy becomes a king by his own hand because he has a great deal of guile, because he is an incredible judge of character, because he has leadership instincts and battle instincts. He knows multiple languages by the time he's king. He is very well read and thoughtful. You know, a lot of that stuff grows out of the Milius movie because Arnold looked like he'd stepped out of a Frazetta painting. But obviously, as an actor, he was pretty raw. And Milius realizes, okay, well, this guy's not narrating his own movie, and we got to keep kind of dialogue to a minimum. The body is the instrument. We're going to use that to its maximum capacity, you know. But inadvertently, it casts this incredibly long shadow now. And it's a thing that you kind of have to make peace with when you're writing the character. At first, you know, you want to whatever, push up your glasses and be like, well, actually, you know, there is no riddle of steel in the original books or whatever, or, you know, well, actually, he's not dumb at all. And I like all that stuff I just said, right? But on the other hand, what I've kind of realized is that it's an entry point to any conversation about the character, not in a bad way. If I go onto the street and I say the word barbarian, someone's going to say Arnold or they're going to say Conan, and not at a Comic-Con, like just anywhere. That kind of that the character is that kind of pop culture penetration that has value, man, in the same way that now you can say the Avengers or even Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff. Everyone knows what that is. So rather than turn up my nose to someone that assumes that it's going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or nothing, I'm like, yeah, did you think that movie was cool? Guess what? You know, there's these ongoing adventures, and this character has all this significance, and these stories are even cooler than you realize. And they took a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they fused it together. And but the prime ingredients, wait till you see them. They're really, really sweet, you know.
Well,
that's so much more valuable. Sorry?
Unlike Doc Savage's film that didn't, you know, hasn't endured. And they tried really hard. But it didn't, you know, so no, I can appreciate that. And again, as you say, no, this is the movies, and especially the first one, good entry level.
Absolutely. This is it gives you the entry point for the conversation. The Frazetta paintings are iconic for a reason, and they sold hundreds of thousands or millions of books. I want to understand that, and I want to channel that, and I want to use that energy and go, yes, we are all part of this thing. That's why something like the Atlantean sword is so valuable. It's so iconic as a piece of pop culture, you know, design. So if I can bring that into the comics, and you've never read the comic, but you know that sword, and you're like, oh, cool, great. Now you're surprised you're reading something that's built on Howard and done with as much love and enthusiasm as we can pump into it. So it's all things, you know, like I knew that we could get some really good engagement on our first issue and whatever, dozens of variant covers and all the tricks that you do in publishing to try and bolster yourself. But what really mattered to me was like, are people reading? Do they care on issue 13, 14, 15? And what's amazing to me is like the number of reviews we get on the book for issue 14 is equivalent to what I would have seen with an issue 1 or 2 on most of my other series. That people are, more outlets are talking about it, more outlets are engaging with it. Readers are, you know, the Blackstone book is making people run back and grab the first couple trades, and that they're talking about it and they're excited about it. That is really, really rare and special, you know. But professionals I've known for years, and they're friends of mine or their acquaintances, suddenly being like, "Dude, I am reading this book." You know what I mean? Like people, you know, Tomasi was talking to me, and he's just like, "This book is crazy. I can't believe how beautiful.
Yeah.
Where find De La Torre? What the hell?" And I was like, I know, right? And stuff like that, or you know, Chris Cantwell, and he's just like, in the nicest way possible, like, I didn't think you had it in you. Like, this stuff just pours out of you, man. Like, you know, well, I had one of my most fun conversations ever. I've told this anecdote before, but it's too good not to. And for your listeners, if they haven't heard it before,
Please.
So I'd never met Richard Starkings. I never worked with him before. What a delightful guy. He's a legend. He's
Absolutely,
wonderful,
man. One of my favorite people in comics, indeed.
When I found out he was going to be lettering my book, I was like, this is bonkers. And then later I found out he requested to letter the book because he had seen De La Torre's stuff. And so all of a sudden I'm having these messages back and forth with Richard, and he's so excited and so hardworking and passionate, whatever. And I was at San Diego, and we had the advanced copies of the book launching there. And I just wanted to thank him. So I went by the Comic Craft booth there, and he's holding court because of course he is. He's friggin' Richard Starkings. There's like 12 people chatting with him. And so I walk past and I kind of circle around, and I figure, well, it's preview night. I'll come back around and hopefully I can catch him with maybe 1 or 2 people, and I can kind of wedge my way in there. And I start walking away from the booth, and all of a sudden I hear, "Oh, Jim, you're not going to walk away, are you?" And I was just like, "What?" And I turned around, and Richard Starking's like running into the aisle. And I'm like, well, Richard, I didn't even think you knew what I looked like. And he goes, "Well, of course I do. I've been watching all your interviews." And I was just like, "What?" And he goes, "Oh, this is the greatest. The Conan stuff is so great." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And then he goes, "It's really pouring out of you. It's like it's coming out of your skin. You've got the Robert E. Howard. It's coming through your fingers." I was like, "Yeah, man, it really feels like it. It feels really special. Like I've got the lyricism, and I'm like I'm steeped in the material. I'm marinating in it. I can't get enough of it. I'm not copying, but I've got that rush. Like, it sounds a bit like Howard in all the best ways." And he goes, De La Torre's drawing like a fucking demon." I was like, "Right?" And so there we are. We're in the big aisle in the middle of San Diego Comic-Con, excitedly jumping up and down about our own fucking comic. Like 2 big kids, you know? And he's telling me this is the most fun he's had lettering in over a decade, and he's so dedicated to the book, and like, what an honor it is to be part of this team. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, it's the craziest thing. And even now, he'll just send me little Facebook messages, and he's like nudging captions, or he's like, "Do you think the title should be a little bit smaller?" I'm like, "You're Richard fucking Starkings, man. Like, I trust your judgment. What are you talking about?" You know, like, it's all great. Yeah. I'm down. Yeah. Everything rules. The font choices, everything. That guy is just, wow. Such a consummate professional. Yeah.
Virtuoso, and he makes.
And now I got to brag about.
Lettering makes the books more important. I agree.
I got to brag. So the Blackstone miniseries is being drawn by this guy, Jonas Scharf. Have you seen his stuff before? Man, Scharf is oh my God, he's so good. He's so good. Yeah, that covers by Zaffino. Hold on, I'll show you some Scharf. I'll show you some Scharf stuff.
Please do.
Yeah. Oh my God. Everybody. Here we go. Get another exclusive going here. So we got some issue 2 pages. So this is Blackstone number 2. Fuck, man, this guy is amazing. I love his black and whites. He did a Witcher graphic novel, and I thought the black and whites were phenomenal. And so we'd reached out to him and asked if he wanted to do some stuff, and he was busy. And I just kept kind of needling, and finally we got him on board for this miniseries. So last year at New York, he and I went for dinner with editorial, and I laid out the whole Blackstone story, how it's all going to work and what it is and all this stuff. And man, oh man, he was like totally on board, and he was a little bit intimidated by the sheer amount of characters and the locations and the time periods, but you know, up for the task.
Oh God, yeah, no, he's bringing
my
it.
God,
Absolutely.
yes, he delivered. And
Yes.
the complexity of some of the fight scenes and the crazy visuals and the supernatural bombast, he is just bringing it, man, in the coolest way possible. I could not be more happy. And so it's like all cylinders, like everyone's putting their all into it.
Yeah.
And you know, when you're at the front of one of these, like it all, you know, when you're writing the outlines and then you're writing the scripts, and people are looking to you to drive that thing forward and then to keep that momentum going. You know, every time you get artwork like this, it's easy because you're just like, how could I do anything less than you know, put the thunderclap on it? Like, it's crazy. It's so fun. And everyone on the team is like that. That's what's so cool. You know, Jao Canola, he's the colorist on it, and he's doing a killer job. Everyone is just so sweet to work with. And again, we've got the space, we've got the deadline, we've got the buffer. Like Jonas was done drawing all 4 issues so that we hadn't lettered issue 1 and we had all 4 in the can. So I could make sure that thematically and dialogue wise that we can reflect back and forth and that we're hitting all of our marks in terms of plot. The kind of thing that can be really hard to do on a monthly book. You know, on so many monthly books, you feel like you're throwing track down in front of the train while it's rushing.
Absolutely.
You know? And you're like, oh, there's a canyon. We have no bridge. What are we doing, you know, with the train? So it's such a cool ride. Oh, thank you to the people that are posting. It means so much to me.
Hey, Chow is watching.
Hey, what the heck, dude? You are the greatest. I love that you're in the chat right now. That is so amazing. Well, I guess if you're here, I'm going to show a couple more pages.
There you go. Excellent. Great work, man. Dude, well done, Joe.
This stuff is so fun, and the atmosphere is so great. And we've got this, you know, James Allison, who's this, he might be the first meta arthurial character in fiction. You know, he's appearing here in multiple timelines before everyone. And it's wicked shit, man. It's so good. The eerie kind of color palettes and the stark lighting and the punchy atmosphere, it's all crushing. So Zhao's not drawing it. Zhao's our colorist. Jonas Scharf is the line artist on this series, and he is just banging it. And everyone's just delivering the goods. Could not be more proud. And so, like today, for example, I'm going over lettering on issue 4, which doesn't come out till December, but everything's, you know, getting rounded up. Jeff's already got his essays done for all the Blackstone issues. It was one of those funny things where they were like, Jeff, are you interested in doing essays for that? And yes, of course. You know, we got to give people the context and make this thing as strong as possible. So we're on a pulp parade, buddy. It is, you can see it. It's just like pouring out of me. It is such a fun ride right now. And I'm doing other stuff as well. My wife and I are still doing the Young Adventurers guides for Dungeons and Dragons. I've got a couple other comic projects kind of in the hopper, but obviously so much of my focus right now is heavily Hyborian, as we say. It's all the best kind of qualities, and getting to build this. I've always wanted to do a long run on a series, and on so many of the monthly series, we would have these big plans, and they would always have to be scaled back. The realities of the monthly publishing market, where you just don't know 4 or 5 months from now where you're going to be at. And you'd get these moments where readers would say to you, oh, this seemed like there was a subplot there. Whatever happened to that? And you're like, yup, you know, and you feel foolish because you need to set this material up, but then you don't always get to pay it off. And what feels so cool and so exciting right now is it will get paid off. And I get to, you know, we had a little flashback moment in Conan #1. Let me see if I can pull that up here. So in Conan #1, we have we talk about the Battle of Venarium. This is this really key moment in Conan's life. And we show this really it's dilatory, it's ridiculous, the most bonkers artwork you've seen, the Battle of Venarium. And then we see this flashback, this weird sort of flashback of Conan. Hold on, sharing here.
No worries. This is great, Jim. I really appreciate that you're.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Up here, truly.
Thankfully, my folders are organized. So there's Conan, battling in Venarium against these Aquilonian soldiers. But then there's 2 shots of Conan like hunting a friggin' bear. And you're like, okay. And it talks about the fact that he traveled north and he couldn't find a challenge, that could stop him. And it's like this weird little bit, like, what does that mean? And literally a year later, so in issue 13, we tell the story of that bear hunt, because we're not just going in order. We can jump around. You don't need to know that right now. That's not important to the current narrative.
I get it.
It's not thematically critical. But when it is critical, when the time comes, then we're going to show you. And so there we are, issue 13. And it's like Doug Braithwaite is drawing that arc. And poor Doug Braithwaite, I say to him, dude, we're going to do a bear hunt. Hope you like drawing animals. And lo and behold, he draws the living crap out of it. Of course. And so here we are, literally, 12 issues later, we get to pay off this little bit. And there's these flashbacks to when Conan's younger, in his youth, and he's figuring out stuff about what it is to be a warrior. And then we're intercutting with this amazing bear fight, right? And he's got it on his back, just like we saw a year earlier. And there's multiple instances of that. There's stuff that we've already teased that's in the second story arc that is just like a little aside. Sometimes it's a bit of dialogue or a visual thing, and I'm going to bring it back 8, 10, 12, sometimes 15 issues later. You're going to find out what that's all about. It doesn't interrupt the flow. You're going to get it when you need it. And that's what's really, really cool. And so, and I'm not afraid you're never going to get to it. Like I was saying, that looking over your shoulder every 6 or 8 months,
right?
The best compliment I got, Zdarsky congratulated me on the contract, and he was like, "Surprise, you get to plan. You just got the best deal in comics," and we were laughing about that. So it's been really
that's
cool.
terrific, man.
Yeah, it's really cool, man.
Yeah, no, Jim, truly, it's rare, especially now and after so many stories have been told over the years of various characters. Mm-hmm. It's always great when a creator, a new voice comes along, and it's like, no, this guy gets it, or this woman gets it, and truly, it's again, the proof is there, and I'm so glad that the readership and that the stores appreciate what you're all doing.
I've got all sorts of projects I've worked on. I've been incredibly proud of, and sometimes the sales don't find it. And
sure.
It's, quality is not just numbers. You know what I mean? You can see it all the time, whether it's movie, box office, and then they become a cult hit, or
sure.
They never find that audience, but there's that little tight audience that it speaks very closely to them. I don't think commercial success begats art or whatever.
I agree.
When both of those things are working in unison the way you hope they do, and that good word of mouth is so valuable, where people are really like people not only buying multiple covers and variants, but buying extra copies. I was at Fan Expo, Canada, the big show in Toronto. Oh, cool. So I got to follow.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. I'm doing this because I don't want to disrupt your flow, but I do want to acknowledge these people that are saying.
I'm at Fan Expo Toronto, and there's these guys coming over the table, and they've brought books to get signed, but they've also got a stack of books for a bunch of their friends, people that couldn't make it to the show, but also people they just wanted to get hooked. And so that's like, as a gift, hey, I bought them the first trade, and will you personalize it to so and so? And you're like, oh, that's it happens. But constantly, you know what I mean? That was the thing. Oh, or someone comes over the table and you're used to having to hand sell your own book. And someone comes over the table and they pick up the trade and they hand it to their buddy and they go, "You're buying this." And you're like, well, I guess he's buying it.
Hey.
You know what I mean? Because they're like, "You're going to friggin' love it. Check this out." And then the guy flips like 2 pages, sees the dilatory art or the Braithwaite art and goes, "All right." And you're like, boom, let's go. You know what I mean?
I do. That's great, man. Too goddamn funny.
Yeah, it's crazy. Again, these guys old enough to be my dad, some of them coming over, like sparkles in their eyes, and they're like, Mr. Zub, it's such an honor to meet you. And I'm like, come on now. Don't be like that. That's silly.
But Jim, that's the thing, sweet, man. And I know, as someone who, you'll forgive the phrase, straddles the older generation and the younger generation.
Sure.
And honestly, I get it, because a lot of their books were my first books, and reading a lot of those paperbacks in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And I'm, as I told you, 60 around the corner, ladies and gentlemen, for your humble host here. And I understand, because really it is so wonderful when someone new comes along and they get that thing that you've loved for decades. And it's like, oh, great. Now there's new stuff that I can enjoy just as much as I did 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
And
so no, I totally get it.
Was seeing that good word of mouth. The first couple months, people were like, this De La Torre guy, holy crap's like Big John and Frank Frazetta had a kid, like it's the craziest book and whatever. And you could literally, there would be guys on social media be like, modern comics suck, I'm never buying this, my heart died at Dark Horse and that's where I'm done, and whatever, blah 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 blah. And whatever era that was, whether they stopped with Big John or they stopped with Kerry Nord or they stopped with Tim Truman, or demarcation point's a little bit different for everybody, but they stopped at some point. Or they tried the new Marvel Conan, they didn't dig it or whatever. And that was one of my big fears, was that people were like, oh, Zub's done this and no one cared, so why should we care? You know what I mean? And I was just like, just give me enough time to prove to you that we got something in the tank here. And then month after month of this like relentless good word of mouth, and then you finally break down those barriers, and they do love this stuff. The reason why it hurts, is because they've always loved it and they wanted it to keep going. And now, man, that passion is so thick and so potent and powerful. And I don't think we're perfect. I don't think that, one of the things I warned Titan about, I said, we're getting this real honeymoon phase where people love De La Torre and they love Doug and they love these stories because they're coming out. It'll settle a bit. Like we can't be perfect. We're going to make mistakes. They're putting us on a really high pedestal in a really great way, in a very honorable, way. But at some point we will, we'll stumble. But as long as the aggregate, as long as we are honest and putting ourselves into it, then the overall will be as strong as humanly possible. And I really do believe that, and like, I guess it sort of rounds up the thing we were talking about at the start, when people are angry, when people are passionate or they're freaking out, I try and think very carefully about why they're sending me that angry message, or why they're very particular about a specific thing. And not that I can please everybody, but I'm a big boy. I can take some criticism. I don't mind, especially if it's something I can learn from, you know what I mean? Sure. And that's where it's really helpful to me to go back to that source material, or to make sure that I've got a good concept in mind. And it's not my job to argue with every reader and get them on my side. The work has to speak for itself, and they're going to make decisions about its quality. If someone makes like a factual error, that's when I would point it out. Like, so in the chat there's someone, if they think that Zhao's the penciler instead of the colorist, or, you miscredit someone for a work, or that's just pure fact. This is the artist, that's who did it, or whatever. That variant cover is done by so-and-so. That's the only time I'll usually speak up, if someone misattributes a piece or whatever. But otherwise, it's not my job to win you over. If the book's not doing it, then we got to try harder, and in some ways, the few people that have come to me and they've sort of said, oh, the book's not for me, or, I don't get modern comics. I'm like, well, we'll be here and we're going to keep rocking them out month after month. And, I'm pretty sure like a Joe Jusko cover's got to get on your radar. Like, come on, man. Like this, if you've ever loved the Conan comics, if this guy can't at least turn your eyes our way for a little bit, then I don't know what's left, I can't.
Well, and again, I'll point to these alternate covers of the current arc and everything. It just
so good.
Again, these are, I imagine at some point Titan will, if they haven't already, release some sort of collection of just those kind of covers.
I'm sure. People have asked us about hardcovers and oversized and artist editions and that kind of stuff. I don't think Titan's ever had the bandwidth to be able to do those kinds of things before to that degree. The book is obviously a massive, massive hit for them. It's their flagship title. Nick Landau, he's the owner of Titan. Last year I had breakfast with him at the hotel in San Diego, and literally the note I got from his secretary was, Mr. Landau wants to meet his best-selling comic author. And I was, oh, that's very sweet. And we just literally talked for an hour, like, who are you and what are you all about? And who am I and what am I all about? We didn't even really talk business. It was just sort of like a catch up, introduction. And then this year, I get a note from the secretary and she's like, Mr. Landau, I would like to meet you for lunch. Here's his openings. Oh, nice. And then we had like a 2-hour lunch. And when I got there, he gave me a big hug, like I was his, like his son. Like it was so sweet. And then we just like got into it. And we were both just so excited. At one point, the waitress comes over to get our order, and we're like, "Oh, right, we're here for food," because we're just like, all momentum. And when are you coming to England and all this sort of stuff? Like it was really, really nice. And so, that's where we're kind of at. Titans, obviously, all power behind us. The gang at Heroic is a delight. And they've been so sweet and so excited. Ashley, my assistant editor, she'll contact me and she's sending me the schedule and she's like worried about me. She's like, Jim, there's a lot of stuff coming due. I know you've got a convention. I'm like, my convention calendar? She's like, oh yeah, I plugged it all into my schedule and all this stuff. I just want to make sure that you have time with your wife and all these kinds of things. And you're like, wow, that is not
nice.
That is rare, that is
absolutely.
Yeah. We had a wonderful Heroic party at San Diego. And at one point I brought a friend along and, you're having one of those moments. You're off to one side and everyone's celebrating, having a good time, but you get your little quiet spot, right? And he comes over and he goes, well, I can see why you love this so much. These people seem like this is a business and we're all working together, but they're like, they really love working on this and they really love working with you. And I was like, yeah, this is a really special moment. Like we're celebrating 1 year of the Conan series. We've got, 3 more years that we're planning out and it's going to go fast, but what a cool ride. And to really kind of have those moments where I'm trying to slow down and just sort of drink it in and go, you never know, man, how long will this last? But right now, what a cool moment in my career. And this is, it's really special, John.
Attaboy. That's great, man. Hey, Rise has an interesting question. Conan's world has so many different cultures. How do you handle writing dialogue?
Reese York, yeah.
Oh, so Reese.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to say
writing dialogue. So
yeah, to make them sound unique and authentic. Go ahead.
So one of the things in the original, like there's references to the fact that people are speaking different languages in the Hyborian age. And most of the time, Roy would just have everyone kind of talking. If he wanted to have characters talking another language, he wouldn't usually use the square brackets or whatnot on the sides of it. He would just kind of have everyone kind of talking, whatever, Hyborian English. And if they did an aside, he would do it in kind of captions. I'm trying not to fall into like everyone having really ridiculous stereotype speech patterns, but you do try and give them a little bit of their own sort of phonetic quality. Like sure. I want the Aesir and the Vanir in the north to have this Nordic kind of speech pattern or a little more that they speak in a particular fashion. All the Howard stuff has such a lyrical quality. And at first it can feel a little bit intimidating because you don't just want to copy what's been done before, but you want it to feel like an extension of that language. And so one of the things I did was I literally, when I reread the Howard stories, Conan and other ones, I had a pad of paper and I would write down words. These are words I usually knew, but they're not a word that would have normally come to mind to use to describe something. Or I'd write down a very odd turn of a phrase, or I'd write down a real poetic and lyrical kind of quality in a sentence. And then I did the same thing with a lot of the Roy Thomas issues, where if he was using a particular word or he was describing something in a really evocative way, I never wanted to copy it one for one when I did my own writing, but it was like just reminding myself to think outside of the norm, that I didn't want one character's speech balloons to just feel like it could be attached anywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that has been a really powerful exercise. Howard uses really lyrical language. Some people call it purple prose if they're not a fan of it, but I honestly don't think it goes purple very often. It's very evocative. It's very potent and atmospheric. And I try and put as much of that as possible. He uses alliteration. I probably use more alliteration than Howard does. I find it very potent on the page. So I will, if I've got pairings or trios of things, I try and use alliteration as much as I can. But you can obviously overextend that. And every so often, Chris Butera, my editor, he's like, I know what you're going for here, but there's like one too many. Like you're pushing it past the point. And it's good to have that extra pair of eyeballs on it.
Certainly.
I try and read it back to myself and make sure that it's working. And usually it's just a matter of kind of rolling it off the tongue, and trying to get a feel for it. The two hardest things I've had to write in Conan so far are not comics. In the first issue of Savage Sword of Conan, I wrote a prose story. So what happened was my first feature story in Savage Sword was going to be in issue 2. And I reached out to Chris and I said, I have a favor to ask. A new Savage Sword of Conan magazine is launching. I'm your flagship Conan writer. Can I please have something in the first issue? Like I'm dying. I'm dying if I don't have something in the first issue.
Sure.
And I said, I'll do an essay. I'll do just anything.
Sure.
And they said, we've already got an essay from Roy Thomas and we've already got something from Jeff Shanks. And then Chris goes, I've got a challenge for you. Mr. Joe Jusko is doing the new cover. Why don't you write a short story, a prose piece based on that cover? And I was like, of course. And then the minute I committed to it, I was absolutely terrified, because now you're not just playing in the playground of Robert E. Howard's characters. Now you're playing in the medium of Robert E. Howard. Short pulp story, almost the same kind of word count. Who the hell do you think you are? Who do you think you are? That you would try and, you're the barbarian for the bard, but don't do that. And so Joe had done a rough sketch of the cover, but he hadn't settled on what part of the world it was going to be in. And so he was like, do you need it in the north? Do you need it in a jungle? We're gonna have Conan standing, over bodies with the sword and with the girl. And I said, we're gonna have it in Stygia. It's gonna be the desert. I need a hot sky and whatever. So there he is, makes that beautiful cover, and then I gotta write something to live up to it. I probably sweated more over those 3,000 words, John, than almost anything I've ever written. I've written 70 graphic novels, 70, hundreds of issues of comics, thousands of pages of comics, 3,000 words. Thought I was going to die. My wife was like, you are whining so much. Like, what are you afraid of? I'm like, I'm in the ring. Like, I'm doing a Robert E. Howard style story and a Robert E. Howard in the first issue of the magazine and Joe Jusko and all this stuff. And I'm very proud of it. I'm glad it turned out. And people like it. You do not see the blood between every sentence, your own fears. Because I have no artist. I have no Rob de la Torre. I guess I have Joe Jusko did the image, but still the prose. I got to describe every moment in the action. Anyways, put it all on the line. People liked it. People who actually write prose for a living said it was competent. So I was like, thank God for that. So then issue 2, I've got the feature story in the Savage Sword. And that was a ton of fun. Richard Pace drew this 48 pager, and it's really wild, intense, and tragic and brutal. And then issue 3, I don't have anything in there. And I go to Chris, I go, I'm your flagship Conan writer. I'd really like something in pretty much every issue you can put me in. And he goes, literally, Jim, I have 1 page. I was like, 1 page? Oh, thanks. Cool, man. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, Wesley, I wanted to acknowledge the people that mentioned the Wesley or the
Richard lives here in Toronto, and he was in my gaming group. We would have board game nights and stuff. So
he's a good dude.
He would come over a few hours early, and he would be laying out pages on my dining room table while we'd be hanging out in the afternoon. It was really nice to have that really direct kind of contact with him as we were talking about concepts. So in issue 3, Butera comes back to me and says, okay, Jim, 1 page. I want you to write a poem. So Robert E. Howard wrote all sorts of these poems, and some of them are all different subjects, but he wrote a bunch of war poems and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Write a war poem. I'm like, who the hell do you think you are? You're going to write a poem. And so I said, can we get someone to do a pinup with it? And they said, how about Dilatory? I said, okay, thank God we got Dilatory is going to do the pinup. We can do this, man. We can do this. And so lo and behold, I put together this poem. I'm really proud of it, actually. Let me see if I can pull it up here.
Okay. While that's happening,
the word
Chow's
count.
good night.
Oh,
And
Jow, dude, get some
we'll watch
rest.
the rest of it later.
Go bust out those pages, man. Thank you so much. This is so cool. I love that he popped on. So this poem's called Call Thee to Crom. And Dilatore's got a pinup on it. And man, oh man. Again, the hours spent versus page present, you can't really, don't measure it, because I'm sure I made less than minimum wage on this thing, but that's not the point. So what a cool piece. Of course, Starkings comes in with the perfect font choice. And then there it is.
Look at that.
So yeah, super fun, man. So cool. And it turned out really well, and it's got a nice cadence to it. And so at the Robert E. Howard Days Festival, while I'm there, one of the things they do in the evening, everyone's had a few beers and barbecue and all that stuff, is they do a poetry reading night. So they'll take Howard poems and people will pick their favorites, and they'll stand on his porch and they'll like read this stuff with gusto. So we're about 4 or 5 poems in or whatever. And Bill Cavalier comes over and he goes, I heard you got yourself a poem. And I was just like, oh, come on now. And he's just like, come on, read it. I was like, okay. So I got up there and I read it. And man, it was hot out, but I was sweating more than normal, you know? And the little gathering of the most hardcore Robert E. Howard fans in the world, and they clap and they were really sweet. Someone cracks me open a beer and you're like, all right, I did not face plant, you know, trying to uphold the legacy as much as possible. It's been the craziest year, man. It's been such a cool ride.
Well, here's hoping another 3 are as fun, and I understand, and you're being realistic about it in terms of things may level off. But again, you've got a plan, and that's terrific. You're getting the real estate and time to execute the plan, and that's wonderful, dude. And truly, this latest episode,
Blackstone's been amazing. You know, this is also the first time I've ever gotten. So, you know, my books come out in foreign languages, and that's cool. But I couldn't tell you usually when those foreign books come out. Like, when I went to France to launch the book, I knew then. But otherwise, I have no clue when a particular book's coming out or what language or at what point. I know now, man, because every time one of the Conan books comes out in a new language, or whenever one of the trades come out, we get flooded with messages. I get flooded with messages in Italian and Spanish, French and German. When the book came out in Portuguese, dude, I had these guys on like Instagram Live and stuff waving the book and screaming El Barbaro. And you're just like, all right, this is the craziest cool thing, you know?
Yeah.
That is amazing. And it reminds you again of the expansive legacy of this character. Character's got a huge Mexican, you know, audience. There were these couple guys who came up from Mexico for Howard Days, and they really wanted to meet me, and we did an interview in front of the house and stuff. I mean, there were people in Howard Days. So you talk about rural Texas, right? There's a guy who comes from France every year. There's people coming from Spain, like to the middle of nowhere, because now it's this, you know, fun little fandom and all this kind of stuff.
There was a guy that lived around there and said he would get his hair. Here it is, Wesley again. And he says, I used to get my hair cut at Cross Plains. All the towns are blink and miss them. Groceries were an hour drive on the highway. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So in Cross Plains, we counted. So it's like there is a small grocery store. There's a hardware store. There's a library, a post office, community center, like 4 restaurants. There's a Dairy Queen, a Subway, a barbecue place, and a Mexican place, and 4 churches. No hotel. You know, like there's not, it is blink and you miss it. Like you can drive past the whole thing in a couple minutes. There is like 3 major cross streets, not even really that. it is so tiny, and the town seems kind of at odds with the fact that this is what they're known for. And some of the town embraced it because obviously once a year they're going to get a small kind of injection of commerce, and other people just look at you like you're weirdos and all that kind of stuff, right? In the library, they were really sweet. They were doing a raffle and stuff to raise money for the community and all that.
Great.
It was really cool. But you realize like this weird legacy of the character, and that they didn't realize the extent of it even in the 30s, but let alone since then. So for example, in the house there's a shelf full of books, and it's like very incomplete. There are a bunch of Robert E. Howard's books that he owned. The problem is when the house was originally going to be sold, before they kept it as a heritage home, they were clearing stuff out of the house. So almost all of Howard's personal books were just given to the library. So now they've been taken back from the library, but they still have the Dewey Decimal stickers on the spines, right? And they've got the cards in the back because they don't want to damage them anymore. So you have this little shelf of library books that people were taking out of the library for decades, and they're like Robert's personal copies. His name's usually in the front cover,
Crazy.
Like that's the kind of thing. Like they just had no idea that these things have value, that this is, important. It's like the writing table had been sold and was being used as a coffee table, right? Like what? You don't know.
Right.
You don't know.
Right.
It's a table. It has no meaning.
Sure. Of course, if you don't know.
It's imbued with all this other meaning, right? It's like you go to a museum and you see random bits of clothing, but you go, no, it's important because of who had it and when they had it and why. You know what I mean? It's so.
We have a lot of Hemingway stuff like that in suburban Chicago, so I understand. Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, I was at Chicago Fan Expo this year.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry I missed you because I was in Connecticut.
So fun. I know. I messaged you and I was like, I'm going to be in Chicago. And you're like, yeah, I'm not. I'm like, what the hell? So, but I got in a day early. And so I managed to wander around, which I don't normally have time to do. But I grabbed the train because we were up in Rosemont for that show.
Sure.
But I jumped on the train, which worked out great. Got downtown. Managed to do all the touristy stuff. I went to the Art Institute of Chicago. It was really cool.
Wonderful.
A couple museums and things. I stopped in at a couple comic shops. So I stopped in at Challengers, which was really cool.
Patrick and Dell, our buddies, absolutely.
Oh, sweet. They were great.
Very good friends.
Really sweet. And then I also stopped at Graham Crackers downtown.
Another great store, absolutely.
Yeah. It was busy when I came into the Graham Cracker store, and so I felt awkward because you want to do that thing where you're like, I'm a creator or whatever. And so I had sent them I think a tweet or a social media message like, hey, I'm going to come by, I hope that's okay. And so I'm talking to the woman at the front counter, and I was like, hi, I'm in town for the convention, and I sent a message, and all of a sudden the manager guy just sort of looks over and he goes, you're friggin' Jim Zub. And I was like, I am, yes. And he's like, oh, and he grabs a bunch of the Conan books, and we had a great conversation, and they were awesome. So you have that weird moment. It's all the stores want you to say, if you're coming by or sign some stuff.
Sure.
But you always feel weird about it. You always feel nervous about it. You're like, does this mean anything? Do you care?
It does. I guarantee you it does. Absolutely it does.
I still get those weird sort of moments. It's great. It was great. I had a really nice day, and Chicago was wonderful, man. The Chicago Fan Expo had such a heart of comics. There were a lot of retailers there. There was a ton of people bringing the run by and bringing my Avenger stuff and D&D and creator owned stuff, of course, Wayward and Skull Kickers and Glitter Bomb, and that was like awesome. Because don't get me wrong, working on these franchises is great, but when someone brings you Wayward and says, man, this is my favorite comic, you're like, this wouldn't exist, if we didn't make it. So that's even cooler. It was a really fun ride. And I realized it had been like 6 or 7 years since I'd been to Chicago. And I thought, oh, wow, why? I don't know why it had been so long, but I'm definitely going to be hitting up we've got the 2025 schedule now. My wife and I are looking at the calendar, and she's like, please don't treat it like Tetris. Like you can't fill every box. And I'm like, I know, but I'm excited and people love the book. And she's like, I know. And that's also a big difference because of the lockdowns and all that. I just wasn't able to promote the series when I was at Marvel. We were all at home. So now it feels like all this pent up energy is exploding everywhere in the best way possible. So yeah, lots of cool events coming up.
Wonderful, Jim. Well, I hope that our paths cross in 25 live. It's been a long time since we've seen each other face to face in person.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I can enjoy things like, Battle of the Blackstone, fantastic new arc that just started. And if you're a Howard fan beyond Conan, you'll be very happy to see a lot of Howard verse characters because they're all in the same universe, and that's wonderful and smart thinking on your part. And it's a great start to a new story that also ties into previous arcs as well. So
thanks, man. We're having an absolute ball. And it is a pleasure to be able to chat with you about it. And hopefully we can do so again soon. There's going to be
sooner than later, Jim. Absolutely, man. Please.
Absolutely.
Count on it.
You are the best, man. So thank you for making time. And it's always a pleasure. I love listening to the other episodes and all the different people that you line up. So it is an honor to be in the mix, as they say.
Well, you bring it every time, Jim. And again, this is another great conversation. And I'm thrilled that things are working as well as they are, and that the Conan fans and the Howard fans are as receptive as they are to what you and the rest of your group are doing. Again, it's excellent work. And Conan deserves the best. It really. And Robert Howard
crew is the best, man. They make it look so good every single time. The editorial crew is amazing. Like everyone at Heroic is wonderful. Whether it's Chris and Ashley and Fred and Jay and Marcos and Sean, love those guys to bits. The team at Titan has been really, really amazing, and they're pushing it at every single level. It has been awesome. And then of course our creative teams are just epic, beyond epic. I could not be more proud of the work that they're putting out there. And
that's excellent.
We would be nowhere without them. So Rob and Doug, we've got Jonas now, and then you're going to be seeing the work of Danica Breen. She's going to be coming in to do 2 issues, and her work is absolutely stellar. She's upholding the high bar set by her contemporaries. And then there's a guy named Fernando Dagnino. He did a story in Savage Sword of Conan that people really, really responded to, and I responded to. And so we'll be bringing him in the mix as well. You'll be seeing more of him. So it's a big Hyborian family, man. We're having a blast.
There you go. And everybody should join Jim's Zubstack as well, and get updates, regular newsletters from Jim about what's going on with him. And,
there's a cool thing called Sumerian September. So a bunch of these bloggers and YouTubers are rereading Howard stories or rereading Conan pastiche and kind of celebrating it. And so I decided to join in. So I'm rereading all the original Conan stories and just doing some stray thoughts and commentary. And people are finding that really interesting. So that's another little thing you'll get if you're on the Substack.
Beautiful, man. Well done. Well, I appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for the great conversation. And I'll let everyone know that on the next episode of Word Balloon, a returning person, Alexander Nevsky, is this great Russian actor who's been in America for about 25 or 30 years now. And he's been making action movies. It's ironic that we're talking about Conan and Arnold has come up because Arnold was his hero. He was a Mr. Universe and a bodybuilder and also a former amateur martial artist and karate guy. Well, he's been making his own action movies, and they're a lot of fun. And he's got a brand new Western of all things, but it's actually historically accurate, even though he's got the thick Russian accent, because it's really based on a true person who emigrated from Russia to the States in that pre-Civil War 1850s era, became quite well known, became a general in the Union Army, and became a general through the commander-in-chief himself, Abe Lincoln, which is a great story. These are his Western adventures after the Civil War, where that's where facts got a little murky. So artistic license, Alexander is continuing to tell his stories. But he's released the second movie in a series of films about this character, and we have both Alex and the director on the show to talk about it with our buddy Gabe Hardman, who is usually on when we talk about movies. So that's going to be on the next episode of Word Balloon coming up, both video and audio. So until next time, everybody, thanks a lot for watching us. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.